September 22nd, 1914, Madras Harbor, British India, 9:30 in the evening. The lights of the city are still burning. The oil tanks of the Burma Oil Company sit undefended on the waterfront, and nobody on the entire subcontinent believes a German warship can reach this coast. The Royal Navy controls the Indian Ocean. Troop convoys cross it daily, unescorted, carrying men toward the Western Front. Then, out of the darkness, a single light cruiser flying a false fourth funnel opens fire from 3,000 yards. In 20 minutes, she puts 130 shells into the tank farm. Flames light the sky for miles. Stock prices in Calcutta and Bombay fall the next morning. Lloyd's of London raises war risk insurance on every ship in the Indian Ocean. The ship that did this carried 10 guns, each barely 4 inches in caliber. She had no battleship escort, no friendly port within 3,000 miles, and a single boiler room mishap from disaster. Her name was HMAS Emden.
Over the next 7 weeks, this one ship would sink or capture 23 Allied merchantmen, destroy 2 warships in a single morning, and force Britain, France, Russia, and Japan to divert more than 60 warships to find her. A light cruiser, smaller than most modern destroyers, brought the trade of the British Empire to a standstill. This is how she did it, and why the men who eventually caught her called her something no enemy crew had been called before: a gentleman. To understand why this should have been impossible, you have to understand what the Indian Ocean meant to Britain in 1914. It was not a battlefield, it was a conveyor belt. Wool from Australia, rubber from Malaya, oil from Burma, and above all, troops. Indian Army divisions and Australian and New Zealand contingents moved across these waters constantly, almost always without escort, because nobody believed they needed one. The German East Asia Squadron, under Vice Admiral Maximilian von Spee, was based at Tsingtao on the Chinese coast, 8,000 miles from home, with no hope of resupply once war began. Spee's strategic problem in August 1914 was survival. He decided to take his armored cruisers east across the Pacific toward South America, away from British strength. But he made one decision that would matter more than any battle his main squadron fought. He detached a single light cruiser, HMAS Emden, and sent her the other way, into the Indian Ocean, alone, under the command of Captain Karl von Müller, with orders to wage Cruiserkrieg, cruiser warfare, against British trade for as long as she could survive. By every reasonable calculation, that survival should have been measured in days. Emden displaced 3,650 tons. Her main armament was 10 10.5-centimeter guns, a caliber so light that a single modern light cruiser of the period could simply outrange and outgun her in a straight fight. She carried no armor belt worth the name. She had no friendly base anywhere in the ocean she was about to operate in. Every port was British, French, or hostile. Every collier she needed for coal had to be captured or arranged through agents, under constant risk of discovery. The Royal Navy alone had dozens of cruisers in the region. Add the French Pacific Squadron, the Russian Pacific Fleet remnants, and Japan, newly allied with Britain and eager to prove it, and Emden was, on paper, a single mouse being hunted by an entire continent of cats. British naval planners did not expect her to last a month. What nobody on the Allied side had accounted for was the doctrine Müller had been trained in and the discipline he enforced. German pre-war cruiser warfare theory was built on one principle that British commerce protection planning never seriously modeled. A raider's survival depends not on firepower but on information control, deception, and the willingness to take off enemy crews before sinking their ships. Müller followed this to the letter and went further. Before every capture, he stopped the target, sent over a boarding party, removed the crew and any usable coal or supplies, and only then scuttled or sank the ship. Not one Allied sailor was killed in any of Emden's 23 captures of merchant shipping. This was not chivalry for its own sake. It served 3 operational purposes at once. It avoided the kind of atrocity headlines that would have brought every available warship onto her trail within days. It kept the German crew from wasting ammunition on ships that posed no threat. And it generated something Müller needed more than guns: confusion. With survivors held aboard rather than left adrift to radio positions, British Search Command in Colombo and Singapore frequently had no idea where Emden had last been seen, let alone where she was now. The second piece of doctrine was disguise. Emden carried a collapsible fourth funnel, canvas and wood, that could be rigged in under an hour. From a distance, a three-funneled German light cruiser became, to any observer, indistinguishable from a British four-funneled light cruiser of the Yarmouth class. This single piece of carpentry let Müller close to point-blank range on targets that would otherwise have fled or radioed a warning the moment they identified him as hostile. At Madras, the false funnel and German naval ensign run up only at the last possible moment meant the harbor batteries never got a shot off before the tanks were already burning. If you're finding this story of one ship outwitting an empire interesting, a quick subscribe helps the channel keep telling stories like it. The campaign that followed was, by the standards of any war, extraordinary in its pace. Emden departed the squadron in early August 1914 and entered the Bay of Bengal disguised and coaling from captured vessels. Between early September and the end of October, she intercepted shipping lane after shipping lane along the Calcutta to Colombo route, the busiest stretch of water in British Asia. Each capture followed the same procedure: stop the ship, board, remove crew and coal, sink, or release. 23 vessels went down or were taken this way, totaling roughly 70,000 tons of Allied shipping, an amount that, spread across 7 weeks by a single light cruiser with no support, has no real parallel in the war's surface campaign. The September 22nd attack on Madras was the moment the war stopped being an abstraction for the Indian subcontinent. The Burma Oil Company's tanks burned for 2 days. Civilian evacuation orders went out along the coast. War risk insurance rates on Lloyd's, already elevated by the U-boat threat in European waters, spiked again specifically because of one ship nobody had located. Then came Penang, on the night of October 28th. Müller took Emden, still wearing her false fourth funnel, directly into the harbor at Georgetown, where the Russian-protected cruiser Zhemchug lay at anchor with her boilers cold and most of her crew not at battle stations. Emden's first torpedo and a sustained gunnery barrage sank Zhemchug in minutes. As Emden withdrew, the French destroyer Mousquet attempted to intercept. Outgunned and caught in the open, Mousquet was destroyed within 10 minutes by the same 10 light guns that had no business winning any engagement on paper.
2 Allied warships, one a cruiser nearly Emden's own size, eliminated in a single morning, for no German losses. The psychological effect outran the material one. Within days, Allied Naval Command had to publicly admit that a single raider had now sunk a warship inside a defended harbor. The hunt that followed pulled in resources on a scale wildly disproportionate to the threat. British, French, Russian, and Japanese warships, more than 60 vessels by most accounts, were diverted from troop escort and other duties specifically to locate one 3,650-ton cruiser in an ocean covering 28 million square miles. The end came on November 9, 1914, at the Cocos Islands. Müller sent a landing party ashore at Direction Island to destroy the British wireless and cable station, the same kind of infrastructure raid that had defined the entire campaign. But the station operators got a signal out before the line was cut. An Allied convoy escorting troops to Europe happened to be passing nearby with the Australian light cruiser HMAS Sydney attached. Sydney, faster, far more heavily armed, and built for exactly this kind of engagement, intercepted Emden within hours. The fight that followed was brief and one-sided in a way none of Emden's previous engagements had been. Sydney's 6-inch guns outranged and outweighed Emden's batteries by a wide margin. Müller fought until his ship was burning and unmanageable, then deliberately ran her aground on North Keeling Island to save the surviving crew rather than let her sink with men trapped below. More than 100 of his sailors were killed. The men who boarded the wreck afterward, and the Australian sailors who had just defeated her, treated the survivors with a level of respect rarely extended in 1914 to a defeated enemy. Müller himself was praised in the British press, an almost unthinkable thing in the first year of the war, for the manner in which he had fought, ruthless against ships, careful with lives. The campaign's legacy outlasted the ship by decades. The diversion of more than 60 Allied warships to hunt a single light cruiser became a textbook case study in disproportionate strategic effect, studied by naval planners on both sides through the interwar years. The doctrine Emden embodied, deception, crew preservation, psychological disruption over raw destruction, reappeared in German commerce raiding theory for the next war, in the pocket battleships and disguised merchant raiders of 1939 to 1941, and in the U-boat campaigns that followed. The landing party left behind on Direction Island, under First Officer Helmuth von Mucke, commandeered an old schooner named Aisha, and made an improvised multi-month journey across the Indian Ocean and overland through the Ottoman Empire back to Germany. A postscript almost as improbable as the raid itself. What Emden proved, in 7 weeks that should by any naval calculation have been impossible to survive past the first, was that the numbers on a specification sheet are not the same as the numbers that decide a campaign. 10 light guns against an ocean full of battle fleets. No base, no resupply, no friendly coastline. And yet one trained captain, one piece of disguised carpentry, and a doctrine that treated information and discipline as weapons in their own right, tied down 60 enemy warships and brought the insurance market of the British Empire to its knees. The British, French, Russian, and Japanese navies did not lose to a more powerful ship. They lost, for 7 weeks, to a better idea of what a small ship could do.